Greetings, family, greetings. June Allen here, your racial sobriety mentor from juneallen.net, and welcome to the Racial Sobriety Rooms Masterclass, how to start a People of Colour meeting within your primary fellowship. So thank you so much for joining me on this last masterclass of the Racial Sobriety Rooms virtual conference, the first one of its kind in 2019. So I am really, really chuffed with that. So let me give you a little bit more background about myself. So I've already introduced myself. Just remember, in this session, you need to turn off your phone, give yourself the space to really indulge and receive what you need to receive from this session. So put your phone on silent. Make sure there's no windows open on your laptop that are going to give you loads of annoying notifications and stuff like that. Really allow yourself to just engage in the meeting. So today's agenda, let's have a look at today's agenda. Today's agenda is all about, okay, so we're going to talk about, first of all, what is a People of Colour meeting? POC, obviously, for short. What is a POC meeting? Why are they important? And then the 7 steps to actually go through and get your meeting set up. And I'm going to be going into this really quite deeply because it needs to be done. There are so many things to cover, which is why it's a masterclass and not just kind of like a Facebook Live. So let's dive into the first one. So what exactly is a People of Colour meeting? So a People of Colour meeting is a space where men and women can come together, non-white men and women come together to explore the link between racism and their specific addictive patterns. Obviously, we know that there's loads and loads of different fellowships in recovery. There's different ways that we mask pain, there's different ways that we act out. But what a POC meeting does, a People of Colour meeting does, is it gives us the opportunity to identify with our specific way of acting out. So whether it's alcoholism, or codependency, or shopping or debting or whatever it is, we can have a look at that specific way that we act out, obviously exploring how the impact of racism on our lives impacts the way that we act out. Now, obviously, we're still living under the system of racism. It's not like, if you're white and kind of living in this system, the recovery experience is going to be very, very different. Because obviously I'm generalizing when I say this, but most white people can kind of deal with their issue. Obviously there's going to be some maintenance or whatever involved, and then they can just go about their lives once they've kind of explored and kind of released whatever needs to be released, and generally they can kind of get on with their lives. Obviously they're going to have problems as well to a certain degree, like the rest of us, like any human being is going to have issues or challenges or whatever, but they don't have to live with the extra pressure, the extra oppression of what it means to live under the system of racism, which means that our acting out, our survival, our compulsion to kind of escape pain or escape, the vulnerability of what it means to be black is a completely different thing to manage and think about, which is why, another reason why the People of Colour meeting within your primary fellowship is really important. So it's an opportunity for us to share, and focus on the solution as well. The identification is really important and all the rest of it. So I'm now going to get into, I've kind of crossed over a little bit there, but let's get into, why these People of Colour meetings are important. So, like I was just saying before, we are still living under the system of racism, and as much as amazing as recovery is, racism is also in the recovery rooms. It's still in the recovery rooms, and just because people are getting well, it doesn't mean that this is somehow going to be eliminated from that process, because racism is not really dealt with in the recovery rooms. I've not heard anybody talk about it unless they're a person of colour. I don't hear white people talking about the fact that they oppress other people or anything like that. It never comes up in conversation, because obviously it doesn't impact them. If they're part of that system, it's not going to come up in their conversation, because they're not impacted by it in a negative way. They benefit from it, knowingly or unknowingly. They benefit from it. So the fact that there is racism in the rooms, and the fact that when these conversations are brought up, by those of us that are in recovery, it can be quite triggering for other white people to hear those conversations. It's all the more reason to create a boundaried, safe space to be able to have these sorts of conversations. The other reason why, people of colour meetings is important is because, it's about exploring the fact that racism is an addiction to power. In the same way that, any other addiction kind of manifests itself, I believe that racism is an addiction to power. It's an addiction to violence as well. There are so many different layers of how racism plays itself out. It can be from, somebody minimizing another person of color's experience to genocide and violence. There are so many different layers to it, but all of those things, they kind of feed each other. They feed each other, and they give the people that practice white supremacy, the kind of green light to continue behaving the way that they behave. And like any other addiction, it's fear-based. And, anybody that understands Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing's work will understand that what's underneath this addiction to power, this addiction to violence and all the rest of it is, fear of being extinct. There's been lots of studies and reviews and stuff, especially done in the States, where white people they're dying a lot quicker than having babies, which means that within a few generations that white people could actually be extinct. And so underneath all of that is the psychology behind racism that's driving the behavior. So the whole thing around not race mixing and the whole violence and stuff towards and oppressing people of color is a fear that they're going to be extinct. So if you want to explore a lot more about Dr. Welsing's work, her book is called The ISIS Papers, and she goes into a lot more detail about how racism and white supremacy plays itself out. So it's about, the rooms in the context of recovery is really going to give us an opportunity to explore racism as a spiritual disease and as an addiction to power. So the last reason why POC meetings are important is because, having that safety in order to build community is absolutely crucial, because racism feeds on the whole concept of being disconnected, of kind of being so riddled with toxic shame about who we are, that we just isolate. We isolate, we don't want to talk to other people about it, we don't want to talk to ourselves, we don't even acknowledge ourselves that we've been paying around the vulnerability of what it means to be black, or what it means to be a person of colour. So having a safe community to be able to have these conversations and and talk about solutions, and just to release the stress and the frustration or whatever it is about what it means to be a person of colour living under the system of racism is so crucial. Is so crucial. So let's talk about the benefits now. The benefits of people of colour in recovery. Meeting. So the benefits are you just get the opportunity to share openly about racism in ways that you wouldn't before. I mean, when we think about it generally, there is not that many, except for when you're at home, if you're not in a mixed race relationship or whatever, apart from your own home or whatever, there's very few spaces where you can share openly about race without the white gaze. There's very few places that do that, and I've seen this happen so many times because I've created a few spaces where they're very boundaried, where white people are not allowed to attend those spaces, and I've seen the relief on people's faces, the relief at being able to speak quite openly about how they feel about racism and how they feel about living under a system of racism, and people talking about the anxiety around, being in white spaces, the frustration and the anger and all of that kind of stuff, which is very difficult to talk about in white spaces because, the dynamic is, the white feelings are more important than black lives. That is the general consensus. White feelings are more important than black lives. And so, which means that quite often, we're silenced. We're silenced about having honest conversations about race. So, that is a really, really huge one about being able to share openly about it. The next one is really understanding internalized racism, and this is a massive one because a lot of times racism goes on unconsciously. It goes on unconsciously. You know, we internalize it, and we don't really understand the impact of how it impacts our relationships, how it impacts the way that we work, how it impacts the way we parent, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of us don't really understand that, and it's only when we get into these safe spaces and really start to have honest conversations about it that we can really understand how much of this stuff that we've internalized and the lies that we've told ourselves about who we are. So yeah, understanding the internalized racism is really massive, really massive. The next one is the identification, and this one is so important again, because you know, I speak to many people that, again, they don't really understand the impact of it, and a lot of times people think that, you know, racism is just about calling somebody the N-word, and it's not. They don't really understand, you know, the systemic part of it, how insidious it is, how it impacts, you know, so many different areas of people activity. Again, going back to Dr. Welsing's work, and also her mentor, who was a brother called Neely Fuller. You know, he talks about 9 different areas of people activities: economics, education, entertainment, labour, law, politics, religion, sex and relationships, and war. You know, and being in a space to be able to have different conversations about how racism plays itself out is really powerful. And so the identification around the internal stuff, the way that it impacts us internally, as well as understanding how racism operates as a system, is really important for the identification and understanding of it. The next one is about breaking isolation. Again, I hear so many people talking about how isolated they are, how lonely it is, and like I was saying before about how racism actually feeds on us being silenced and us not really feeling that we can talk about it. So, you know, breaking the isolation is a really cool part of not only just understanding how racism operates, how you've internalized it, but also, you know, the whole thing around shame reduction, which is the next one. Shame reduction, again, shame is another thing that silences. It keeps us hidden. It keeps us not sharing our truth. It keeps us from each other because we're just so ashamed of, you know, who we are. We're so ashamed of who we are. We're ashamed of our blackness because, again, that's what we've internalized. So being able to share openly, you know, shame can't survive. It can't survive when we speak. You know, shame definitely is reduced when we speak out about these things, especially when with other people that look like us. So it's very powerful to have that safe space to be able to talk about this stuff and reduce the shame. The next thing is about, you know, reclaiming identity. As we shed all of the stuff that we're learning about what we've internalized and making the definitions and getting clarity around what belongs to us and what is projection from the system of white supremacy, then we can give ourselves a lot more choices about how we reclaim our identity. And it's given us more of a choice. It's like, actually, that stuff doesn't belong to me. So if I want to go, you know, if I want to walk street and oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me, I do apologise. Yeah, if we want to reclaim our identity through our beauty or through how we talk or how we dress or whatever it is, you know, as we shed all of that stuff that doesn't belong to us, we get to reclaim our culture. We can reclaim our rituals, we can reclaim our language, we can reclaim our food. There's so many different things that we can reclaim about our culture, and that is just such a beautiful thing, because then that means that, you know, we're able to return to our sense of wholeness as African people, as people of colour. So yeah, that was one of the most powerful things for me, actually, is realising that I now have choices about, you know, how I show up in the world. Because I have you know, the more I speak about things, the more I understand racism, the easier it is for me to reclaim, you know, what was mine, to explore what I really want, and sort of, you know, be clear about what my values are, my cultural values and stuff like that, and then take the steps that I need to in order to reclaim my identity. And the last one is about building trust. Building trust is, again, it's one of those things that racism actually feeds off. It feeds off our lack of trust of each other, our hatred of each other, our hatred of ourselves. And so being in a space, a bounded space in a meeting, which is where we're sharing quite openly and being vulnerable about how we feel, that really does help to build a sense of trust with each other, especially if we're sponsoring each other, we're doing outreach with each other, we're sharing our truth, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a really powerful way to get to rebuild trust in the community, which is a huge thing, because I hear a lot of people talking about, you know, there's not a lot of trust in the black community and stuff like that. And so, you know, rebuilding the trust and stuff is a really key part of being able to do this. So that is the benefits. So let's now look at the 7 steps to actually start your meeting. Okay, so here are the 7 steps to start your meeting. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a sniffle I need to sort out. Okay, so 7 steps to start your meeting. The first thing to remember about starting up your meeting is that meetings are autonomous. And that means that, you know, each meeting, you know, they do have the power to actually make a lot of their own decisions on the policies and stuff like that. Now, within 12-step recovery, they do have the basic 12 traditions. And the 12 traditions are guidelines, basic guidelines for group conduct, just like the steps are guidelines for individual recovery and the, you know, the process is how that works. The 12 traditions are set up for each group to kind of, they've got like a skeleton outline to actually run it. And tradition 4 talks about each group being autonomous, meaning that if you want to set up a people of colour meeting, if you know, as an arm of a bigger fellowship, that you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to do that because each meeting is autonomous. So don't let anybody tell you any different around that. The other tradition that's important is tradition 1, which talks about, you know, unity must come first. And so, you know, the safety of the group, the unity of the group, it really has to come first, which is why it's important to think about, you know, whether you want a closed group or whether you want the group to be open. And when I say closed, it means obviously boundary, there's only people of colour that are allowed to attend the meeting. And obviously if it's open, then anybody can come, but the focus of the meeting is around, you know, racism and addiction. It's totally up to you how you want to do it. You know, my suggestion is, you know, if you're new to a lot of this, then I would keep it closed, only because you know, until you have got some racial sobriety behind you, until you've kind of, you know, built up your internal boundaries around this stuff and understood a bit more about how your own internalized racism plays itself out and stuff like that, you may find yourself in a situation where, you know, the meeting can become quite codependent around white people, around whiteness, because, you know, the system of racism is so powerful, and I've seen in situations before where the groups have been mixed, for whatever reason the group's been mixed, and what I've seen happen is that, you know, the people of colour end up almost apologising to white people for having feelings and for showing up and saying how they feel about different things. So it is really, really important, I think, especially in the early days, is to make sure the meeting is bounded. And later on, if you want to set up another meeting that's all-inclusive or whatever, then that's fine. But in these early stages, especially when the concept of racial sobriety in recovery is such a new thing, and, you know, there's a lot of us that still need to get sober around a lot of this stuff, then I think it's important to, you know, my suggestion would be to keep it as a closed meeting. So the second thing is to, you know, find the 2 or 3 people that actually want to do this work. You know, it's good if you can find some people that are seasoned, you know, that have been in recovery for a while, because obviously you're going to need the support. You're going to need people that, you know, that are not kind of early on in recovery and kind of extra vulnerable, because setting up this meeting and doing this work is going to take you to a new level of vulnerability. So, you know, if you can find, at least if there's 2 of you that have got a little bit of recovery behind you, then it doesn't matter if the 3rd person is a newcomer or whatever. But at the end of the day, you've just got to be willing. That's just a suggestion, but you just got to be willing, you know, and obviously you're going to need, you know, a secretary, a treasurer, newcomer group, a chair. There's just some suggestions there for the type of people, you know, the service positions that you're going to need. I mean, definitely a secretary and a treasurer are the 2 key people that you're going to need to start the meeting anyway. So the third person could just, do whatever. So yeah, just make a point of getting those service positions in place before you actually decide you're going to set up the meeting. When I first set up my own People of Colour meeting years ago, I made the mistake of not actually getting the service positions put in place before I set it up. So what happened was, because there wasn't a lot of people that were sober in that particular fellowship around the People of Colour stuff, I ended up doing a lot of the service positions myself, and then it just became exhausting. I became resentful, and it just became very, very difficult for me to continue doing the meeting. And actually, the meeting folded after probably about maybe 6 months because I just couldn't sustain it. I couldn't sustain all the service positions, which was, it was just, now I understand that I should have got that stuff in place before, but it was a learning experience for me. But now, there are People of Colour meetings and stuff like that around where, there are enough people doing service and stuff like that, which is great because a lot more people are starting to get sober in this stuff. So yeah, so having sort of 2 or 3 people to help you do this stuff is really, really important. So the next one is, what's the next one? The next one is the starter pack. Most primary fellowships, if you go onto their website, they will have a section on, how to start a meeting. They'll have some sort of starter pack or whatever. So if you can download that as well, with your stuff that I'm going to give you as well in this session, it's really going to help you to combine the kind of basic principles and outline and stuff of your primary fellowship, and then all you have to do is kind of add the stuff that I'm going to suggest to you to the starter pack that's already available. So that's really going to help you as well. So the next one is the location. You want to think about the location, you want to think about rent costs, you want to think about transport. Is it easy for people to get to? Are there any other meetings that happen in that particular location? Or maybe you don't want to do it in person. Maybe you want to start the meeting online or Skype or whatever. You can, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people using Skype, using the audio version of it. Or maybe you want to use something like Zoom, which is kind of like, it's video conferencing, which can be quite nice because it almost feels like then that you're in a face-to-face meeting, and it's a different level of intimacy having video conferencing. So you can use Zoom, that's ZOOM. There is a charge for it. The free version, I think you can only use it up for 45 minutes for free. And you have to pay if you want it for longer. So obviously if you want an hour meeting, then you'd have to get something together to pay the monthly fee, obviously, to be able to do that as part of your Tradition 7, which is actually paying, making donations in order to pay the rent and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, the location is really important. The thing, I would say as well, if you can actually get rent for a room where there's already other meetings, where there's already fellowship meetings happening, that is really going to be a bonus for you, because that means there's going to be more recovery traffic, which means there's probably going to be more chance of other people of colour that are in recovery that are going to be seeing your posters and stuff that you might put up. So yeah, if you can actually find a location, a room in a location where there's already other meetings happening, then that's really going to be beneficial to you. So that's about the location. So then you need to build a script. Now obviously I'm going to go back to that at the end, but building a script is obviously really important, but to make it specific to people of colour is really, really important. So yeah, we'll go back to that at the end. So the next one is, once you've built your script and everything, then you spread the word. You might actually want to build a subsidiary, like a mini website specifically for people of colour, just to get people to, you might have, book suggestions or other things that are related to people of colour, that people might want to get access to. So if you've got your own little website, which you can put on when you actually put the notice on the primary fellowship website, you can put your own little website link in with that text as well. So then people that want to know more information about, what is racial sobriety in the context of whatever the respective fellowship is, they can go to that website and they can obviously get more information about that. Obviously, in addition to the website, you can, text fellows. I would suggest that you just create a standard text that you can put in, that you can send off to the same, text the same words to the different fellows and stuff like that. You can create posters as well to put up at different locations as well. What I will do actually is around the text messaging, I will actually put a sample of that, an example of that, so then you can just cut and paste that and use that to send out to those that you think might be interested around that. So yeah, so your posters and stuff, obviously you want your time, your date, your location, and if it's boundary POC people only, again I'll put a PDF along with there'll be like a little ebook, actually, just like a mini ebook that goes along with this masterclass with all of the examples of the text, the text messaging example, the poster examples, and also the actual script. The script examples is kind of what I was getting at. So that, and all that will be in the PDF. So just check that you download the PDF after that, so then you get all the information in there. So yeah, the other thing that I wanted to say as well about the primary, about the website, is that you can just get a simple domain name as well. It's very, very cheap. You know, you can probably pay maybe £10 annually or whatever. But yeah, so it might be an example. Say if it's OA, if food is your primary fellowship, that's Overeaters Anonymous. You know, the domain name you might want is, you know, POC, People of Color, OA. .org or .com or whatever it is. So, you know, choosing a domain name to go with your little website and stuff, you know, is a really nice little addition to what you're doing, and you can build that community, you know, because it's important for us to add that on as an extra part of our recovery in order to do this work. So, you know, 7 steps to starting up your own meeting and building a community. That is basically the 7 steps. So now I'm going to walk you through the actual script. Yeah, so now I'm going to walk you through the actual script. So the sample scripts, obviously I was just saying to you, the sample scripts and whatever are available in the PDF. So, you know, you have to remember to go to that. So what you'd need to do, first of all, is to cut and paste the primary script into a Word or a Google document. Okay? So once you've got that, that's going to be your basic outline, what you're going to use, and then you're just going to tweak and whatever with the stuff that I'm going to suggest to you to add to it. And obviously it's important that you just keep rereading and tweaking and stuff like that, so that you understand, so that you can just see how it goes throughout this whole process. So yeah, first thing is cut and paste the primary script into a Word or Google document. Yeah? So now number 3 is we're going to build, I'm going to show you how to build on the areas to convert. The areas to convert are, you know, are really important. So the first bit of it is the introduction, you know, the welcome. So obviously I'm going to read out what I've got on here. So the introduction would be, hello everyone, my name is, welcome to our People of Colour Insert Fellowship meeting. My name is whatever it is, and I'm a recovering whatever it is, and I'm your secretary for this meeting. So that's a basic introduction, yeah? So then the next one is, the next thing is to put in is the Tradition 1 statement. And I put that, it's important for that bit to go at the top of the meeting, because if there is any white people in the meeting that that are not aware that it's a closed meeting, it's an opportunity for them to get clear about how they identify, and if they obviously identify as white, then they realise that the meeting is not for them. So, you know, the Tradition 1 statement would be something along the lines of, you know, Tradition 1 states that, you know, safety and unity must come first. You know, this meeting is a closed meeting for people who identify as a person of colour. And then there's a section where I talk about defining what a person of colour is, and then saying, you know, if you do not identify as a person of colour, you know, please respect these boundaries, you know, and leave the meeting. You can please check the website at whatever your primary fellowship website is, and keep coming back to the program. So that bit goes into the top of the script, and obviously again all of the examples and stuff will be in your in the PDF. So now we'll get into the preamble. So the preamble bit is you put your fellowship preamble first, and then the People of Colour preamble will go below that. So the People of Colour preamble says, as people of colour, we experience our recovery journey through an additional prism impacted by historical legacies and current issues of racism, white supremacy. In this meeting, we explore the connection between racism and our addiction. We share our experience, strength and hope to empower ourselves and find racial sobriety one day at a time. Racial sobriety means that we have a deep, intimate connection, awareness and acceptance of our identity. We live in the present, maintain perspective, seeing ourselves and others as equal members of the global human family. So you could choose to leave it there, but there is another section that I've got in as well here. So I've put, to counter the destructive consequences of racism and our addiction, we draw on 5 major resources. 1, sobriety, our willingness to accept ourselves and to stop acting out in our own personal bottom line behaviour on a daily basis. 2, sponsorship and meetings, our capacity to reach out for support from other people of colour within the fellowship. 3, steps, our practice of the 12-step program of recovery to achieve racial and emotional sobriety. 4, service, our giving back to other people of colour what we continue to receive, what we continue to freely receive. 5, spirituality, our developing a relationship with a power greater than ourselves, which can guide and sustain us in recovery. Okay, so again, it's about using your common sense and, you know, maybe discussing it with other people that are going to be part of the group. You know, is that bit along with your primary preamble, is that too long, or how does it read? You know, just keep tweaking it. Okay, so that's the preamble. So the next thing is, actually I've already talked about this, but already the closed group boundaries, and about whether you're going to just have it as white people up. I'm going to read the bit anyway. So it says, our common welfare must come first, and in order to protect the safety of the group, this meeting is only open to members who identify as a person of colour. In this meeting, we explore race issues just like men or women's groups explore gender. If you do not identify as a person of colour, we respectfully ask that you leave this space and check Insert Parent Fellowship website for alternative meetings. We hope that you find an appropriate meeting and keep coming back to the programme. And just to kind of put in there as well is that you may get some white people that are saying, oh, this is racist, why are you doing this, blah, blah, blah. And when I say to people, if you say to people, there's no difference to what we're doing, just like a men's or women's group. Women's groups explore gender, men's and women's groups explore gender as it relates to addiction, and we're exploring race as it relates to addiction. It's absolutely no difference. And when I suggest that to people, then they shut up, basically. So if anybody says anything to you about that, the fact that it's a closed group, then you can do the same thing. You can make the suggestion, say, okay, well, if it's a woman that you're talking to, you can say, actually, would you think it's appropriate to actually go into a men's meeting? Would you think it's appropriate to go and sit in a men's meeting and start sharing when that meeting is actually nothing to do with you? That meeting is for men only. Would you go to a men's meeting? No, they wouldn't, because they absolutely understand that boundary. But they're not. The thing is with these meetings is that people are not used to us setting boundaries around this stuff. They're not used to us setting boundaries around our needs. So you may well get resistance and kickback about this sort of stuff, but you just got to explore, you know, just explain to them. So we're not exploring, to explain to them in the context of what I just said, and that actually gets them to understand what you're trying to say. Not that you need to explain anything to them, but it just gives you an opportunity to use that as an example to get them to see how ridiculous what they're saying is. There'll be more stuff I'll be talking at the end actually about resistance and safety. But yeah, I just wanted to put that in terms of the closed group thing. So the next part of the bit that needs transforming is the race network sharing. So this bit of the meeting is really important because, you know, for a lot of us, and I'll read it out just so you understand what I mean. So this bit says race network sharing. For many of us, the racial power dynamics in our sponsor relationships make it difficult to share our experiences honestly. For this reason, we give ourselves permission to write a separate race inventory, which can be read without feedback from the group. If there are several people wishing to share, the time will be divided up appropriately. If there is anyone wishing to read any race-related step work today, if yes, then obviously there's a maximum of, then you divide up the time, whether you want to give it 5 minutes or whatever. You can decide with the other people as part of the group, how long you want that sharing time to be, what, be 5 minutes or whatever. Yeah, and then obviously you need a timekeeper or whatever to time that, and then obviously you just ask the person to begin reading their race inventory. So I always advise people that are in recovery, people of colour, to actually keep a separate book and actually write out all of their race-related stuff in that separate book, and then take it to the appropriate POC meeting and read it there, so they can read it without feedback from the group. They can feel safe that there's going to be people there that are going to understand it and all the rest of it. So yeah, so that's really, really important. So that's that. So the next bit of the the group is, let's see, is the monthly. The monthly format is just, it's not really necessarily kind of POC related. It's just you making a choice, you know, how you want to structure the month. So it might be that one week you do the basic text of the respective fellowship. You know, the next week you could have Getting Current. The next week you'd have a guest chair speaker. Guest chair speaker is obviously really good because if people are sharing about their experience, strength and hope around racism and addiction, and then other people got the opportunity to share back, that can actually be really, really powerful. So yeah, so having a guest chair speaker is great. Then you could do, you know, another week you could do use the 12 and 12 as a step study. The other thing that you could do, which could be quite powerful, is have, you know, create a series of questions around racism and stuff like that, which could be useful for you to use within your respective fellowship. So yeah, obviously do that. I can probably include some actually. I'll have to have a look and see if I can, because I have got some somewhere. I'm sure I can include some that you can have. Maybe, I don't know, maybe sort of 20 to 30 questions or whatever. But I mean, that's probably going to be more about in the step 0 course that I'm going to be doing. Actually, I'm going to be, you know, talking a lot more about that as part of that structure. But yeah, if I can find some of those questions for you, I will obviously include them in the PDF as well that goes with this session. So that's it in terms of the monthly format. So you get to decide. It might be a book, you know, there might be a book around racism that you think is not appropriate. Again, it's about, you know, looking at how your group is going to decide what is actually going to be included in that section. Okay, so the next bit that needs to be looked at is obviously the sharing part of it. So so this part of the script reads, a share is an experience that has helped us grow. Cultural identification can open doors for powerful personal and community healing. When we are honest, open and willing to share our truth, we experience a new sense of freedom where courage and community replace fear and isolation. Please respect our sharing code of conduct. Speakers should refrain from reference to literature, authors and counsellors by name. We do not engage in crosstalk, which is defined as members interrupting or directly addressing another person's share. This meeting is a space to promote healing, respect and spiritual growth, and we honour these principles by not using racial slurs or racially abusive language, regardless of the context. Please keep profanity to a minimum. If you do hear something you believe to be unacceptable or racially triggering, you may wish to step out of the room for the duration of their share to keep yourself safe. Take what you like and leave the rest. The Secretary will repost this statement if necessary in order to maintain the safety of the group. So that bit obviously is really, really important, because it's going to give us context as to why the sharing part of it is important, and also to keep the boundaries around the time, and also about the whole thing around using racial slurs. There are some people out there that still think the N-word, you know, they're reclaiming it and all, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And for me personally, it's, you know, the history of it just means it's just a no-no. You know, it's just a no-no. So I think that keeping that word out of the meeting, because it can be very triggering for other people to hear that word anyway. So any type of racial slurs, any type of racially abusive language, regardless of the context, needs to be kept out of the meeting in order to protect the safety of the group. The safety of the group must come first. Yeah? So the other thing that I wanted to say about the sharing part of it as well is you may want to have a separate reading around the the crosstalk section as well. Again, that will be part of the PDF also. Yeah, so you know, in the crosstalk section, having somebody read out the crosstalk section can be quite powerful to actually hear why the crosstalk section is important, defining exactly what it is, and all the rest of it. So yeah, you might want to read that out as a section thing, but it's totally up to you. It just depends on how you want to structure the meeting. So that's the sharing part of it. So the next bit of it is top line actions and gratitude. Now this bit is really, really important, because obviously living under the system of racism is hard. Recovery can be hard as well. So this bit is all about nurturing yourself and cultural nourishment. So top line action and top line behaviours are positive behaviours basically that help you to, let me read it and then you'll obviously understand what it's about. So it says top lines are for people of colour are positive behaviours that can build self-esteem and enhance our recovery from this addiction. When we are grateful, it can bring clarity, hope and peace to our day. I will now invite each member to share something they're grateful for along with a top line which will promote your recovery today. Please be specific and keep it simple so we can finish on time. Would so-and-so start? So obviously inside the PDF, there'll be a list of top line actions that you can use to promote your recovery. Now in the actual PDF itself, I think there's maybe 10 to 15. But I do have another kind of like mini ebook with a lot more, like, I don't know, maybe 50 to 75, maybe even more actually now as I keep adding to them. So, and I will actually give you access, I will give you the link actually. If you want to get more for yourself or whatever, then you can obviously buy that as a separate product. But into this building the script for the meeting, there's about maybe 10 to 15 top lines that I can put in there for you to actually read out in the meeting. Okay, so that's that. So that's the top line actions. Very, very important, and I would strongly encourage you to keep that bit in the meeting because it's really good, and it tends to, you know, having the gratitude bit as well. It tends to keep things, it tends to keep the session nice and balanced, and people, you know, they leave the meeting with, you know, feeling a sense of hope, and you know that they have the power to take care of themselves despite feeling powerless under the system of racism. So the last little bits that are important are the closure. So the only bit that's different about the closure is, let me read it. It says, in closing, I would like to remind you that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and does not represent us as a whole. Take what you like and leave the rest. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of our program. If we are to recover, we must feel free to say what is in our minds and hearts. Therefore, whom you see here, what you hear here when you leave here, please let it stay here. Reason things out, talk to each other, but let there be no gossip or criticism among us. Instead, let the peace, love and understanding of the program grow in you one day at a time. After a moment of silence for those still suffering and for those who have died from this disease or impacted by the system of racism, please join whoever the chairperson is or speaker in the serenity prayer. Okay, so yeah, so the last bit about, you know, having a moment of silence for those still suffering from the impact of racism or who have died from, you know, addiction and whatever, I think it's important, again, just to bring that little bit in, and it makes it relevant to, you know, to the demographic that is part of this actual meeting. So yeah, so that's kind of it. That's the closure bit. That's basically it. Around building the script. So it's going to take a little bit of time to do it. So, you know, number 4, again, it's about reading it, rereading it, tweaking it, print it out, look at it, read it again, tweak it, underline it, highlight it, whatever you need to do, you know, share it with the other fellows that are going to be part of the group as well. And, you know, keep reviewing it until you're happy with it. You know, if it sounds like it's too long or whatever, it's too wordy, then obviously feel free to cut and paste the bits that need out. But I've given you some really solid ideas for you to actually put inside the script for you to build it and to start the meeting. So that is your building the script. So really, really tough with that. So the last thing that I really wanted to talk to you about was this whole idea of resistance and safety. Now, I touched on it briefly when I was talking about the traditions and tradition 1 about how, you know, the safety of the group, you know, unity of the group has to be the priority. But unfortunately, because there is racism in the rooms and because there may be situations where, you know, you may come against resistance from other white people acting out their stuff, it's important to have, I wanted to share some suggestions with you as to how you can deal with a lot of these things and to remain unified as a group. So the first thing that I would suggest is, you know, make sure that you have regular business meetings so that you can draw up some sort of action plan as to how to deal with disruptions in the meetings. You know, have a group conscience and stuff like that as well. To keep and you know, talk about it regularly, because stuff is going to happen. You know, you may well have, you know, situations where white people want to come to the meeting, or, you know, you might get people, you know, racist abuse or whatever it is. There are different things that are going to show up in the meeting, or there may be people of colour actually in the meeting, that are being disrupted. So, you know, there are things that are important to take into consideration around this, around the safety. So the first thing to remember, again, like I said, tradition one, the common welfare must come first. So the personal recovery, our personal recovery depends on, you know, the POC unity, basically. Okay, so the second one is, you know, anybody that is being disruptive in the meeting, you know, they should be, they need to leave at the end of the day. So if there are only white people in the meeting, then, you know, my suggestion would be to read the boundary statement again. The boundary statement is something, again, that I will put in the PDF. And, you know, so if they don't identify as a person of colour, then they need to leave the meeting. Obviously, the thing that I would say as well is that there are some people that identify as a person of colour that almost do look white, you know. So I think from that perspective as well, you can't sort of police people to the degree like, you know, well, you need to tell me who your, you know, third grandmother is, third removed or whatever, for us to decide whether you are a person of colour or not. You read out the boundaries for what is a person of colour, and if that person remains in the room or whatever because they identify as a person of colour, then obviously then they, you know, they have the right to stay. But obviously if somebody clearly is white, you know, or, you know, or they admit that they're white, because I've had situations where, you know, the boundaries have been read out and they've said that they are white, but they want to stay because, oh, my granddaughter's mixed race or my wife's black or whatever it is. That is not the reason for them to stay in the meeting. The meeting is not for them. The meeting is for people of colour, so they need to leave. It doesn't matter whether you've got, you know, family members that are people of colour or whatever. If they identify as white and the meeting is a closed group, they need to leave. You know, if the meeting does get really disruptive or whatever, or things get heated or physical or whatever, then it's important that, you know, you need to phone the police. Yeah, you need to phone the police and kind of abandon the meeting if things get really, really disruptive. The third thing that's to think about is, you know, it may be like if somebody's being disruptive in the meeting or whatever, you may ask them to stay away from the meeting for a couple of weeks or whatever to get the meeting to calm down and get them to calm down. You know, and before they come back. That's something to think about. And also, if those people that are disruptive, if they want to come back into the meeting, if they've been away, if you ask them to stay away from the meeting for a while, you know, those that have been disruptive, you can say to them, well, you can come back to the meeting if you make amends to the group by performing some sort of service position within the group that can be decided by, you know, the committee. By the committee and by the group conscience or something like that. So that's an important thing to remember. So the next one is, you know, if there are individuals that continue to disrupt the meeting or whatever, then those individuals must be banned from the meeting, because again, tradition one must come first. The safety of the group must come first. If that person, you know, if somebody has been really, really disruptive in the meeting, you know, it is important for that person to be escorted out. Now, what you can do is, as part of the committee, as part of the, you know, group conscience conversation, is to have, you know, 2 or 3 people in the meeting that are designated to escort people out of the meeting if it does become really disruptive. So again, it's something that we can talk about as part of the business meeting. And the last thing that I'll share about is, you know, if there is any danger to people's lives, if somebody becomes threatening or health or damage to property, then it's important to just, you know, get the people who actually that own the building, that have rented you the space. Obviously, make them aware of what's happened. Call the police if you need to, because at the end of the day, you know, it's just going to impact everybody's experience in recovery and whatever. If you know, somebody is being disruptive in the meeting, and you need to set some boundaries around that. So yeah, it's just about ultimately, you know, keeping yourself safe around this stuff. You know, I find it fascinating and just really interesting that whenever this, you know, the subject of race comes up, it just really triggers people, and it just creates, you know, sometimes it becomes unsafe, and people start talking about racism and talking about, you know, ending white supremacy and healing themselves. You know, people can get really triggered by it, and it can create situations that become uncomfortable, and sometimes it can create, you know, sometimes you can feel unsafe as a black person or a person of colour trying to go into the recovery rooms to heal, and you're just coming across all this resistance. So, you know, it doesn't mean that we stop, because at the end of the day we have a right to heal, but it's about putting things in place that are going to give us, you know, going to give us permission, give ourselves permission to keep doing what we need to do. And you just need to stay strong. Stay strong as a group, keep having the meetings, keep setting your boundaries, stay firm. If you need to email me or anything back to get some support or anything like that, then obviously you can email me at info@yardofgreatness.com. Okay, so that's it about resistance and safety. So does anybody have any questions for me? Any questions at all? No? Okay, now it seems that people have found this useful, but they don't have any questions as such. If anybody has got any questions, obviously you can email me, but you need to stay connected. So any recovery events that are going to be happening, you can go to heal.juneallen.net for any current events around recovery that are going on. So you can go there. If you would like to schedule a one-on-one call with me for a sober session, you can go to callme.juneallen.net. Any social media, my handle is @yardofgreatness, and again, there's my email address if you have any questions, feedback, or anything else that you know. Maybe there's something inside this training that I've missed that you think that needs to be updated. Obviously, I'd like to know that as well. I always like to, you know, if there's any room for improvement or anything, I'd really welcome your feedback or anything around that. So yeah, so any offers or anything as well, you can get it. It's all at heal.juneallen.net. So that's it for this session. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your recovery journey, your healing journey. Stay safe, and keep going. Thank you for taking the time to spend with me. I don't take for granted, you know, how important it is to be able to serve my community and to be open to doing this work. So thank you so much for your courage and your willingness to do this work. Yeah, I salute you. So thank you so much again. If you've got any other questions or anything else that you need, just drop me an email at info@yardofgreatness.com. Have a safe 24, and I will see you next time.